There is no one-size-fits-all or a simple fix when it comes to your well-being. Hi, my name is Josephine, founder of Positivity Center and Wellbeing Consultant, and a person figuring out how to be my best. So join me in conversation with friends, sharing what works for them, and then listen to what works for others so you can create something that will work for you. So, hello and welcome to the show. I am so happy to be joined by my teacher and friend, Sue Langley. And Sue, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It's always good to have a conversation with you.
I know it's been awesome to keep in touch with you over all these years. And you were my teacher for the Diploma of Positive Psychology and Wellbeing. So tell us a little bit about that. That was the first ever accredited program, right? You created that.
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
us a little bit about you as you tell us about one of the things that you've accomplished.
So I've been in business almost 20 years, really focusing on the science of positive psychology, emotional intelligence, and neuroscience. And the diploma came about because at the time, positive psychology was a fairly new science. And the only qualification you could get in it was if you did a full master's at Penn. And that was great for people who want that. But we wanted to create something that was more accessible, more vocational, more real, more tangible for people. And we also wanted to give people a qualification around it, that it wasn't just do 8 weeks and then you've got a certificate, depending on if you actually paid attention to the online lectures. So we created it for that reason. And I have to say, I am really proud of it as an achievement, because we created it as a course to start with. Here's a diploma, isn't that nice, sort of thing. But the thing I'm most proud of is so many people have learned so much, changed things in their lives. I get messages literally daily saying it's made me a better parent, it's made me a better sister, it's made me a better daughter of son, it's made me a better friend, I'm a better leader. So the personal and the professional. And for me, the personal is just as important as has it made you a better person in your workplace? Has it made you show up better in your life? Are you nicer to be around? Are you responding better? Are you happier? Because after all, if we are flourishing, then it's easier to support those around us as well.
Absolutely. So here's a question I've never asked you. It's coming to mind as you're telling us how this came to be was, well, why? Like, this was the noticing and you wanted to make something more accessible. I was one of those people that needed it to be more accessible because I couldn't go live in Pennsylvania for 2 years to get MAPP. So it was great. And I all of those things, all of the above, except for better son or brother, because yeah. Yeah. So yeah, what was it? What was the why behind making it? Like, was it how it impacted your life, or how not the diploma impacting your life, but the area of well-being impacting your life? Like, maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've really been always been about the science. So for me, the science is really important. And I don't mean that I'm a scientist. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an academic or anything like that. But I want to know the evidence behind it. I want to know what's going on in my head. I want to know what's going on in my body. I don't just want the soft, fluffy of, go do this and it will make you happier. I want to know the research, the evidence, the science. So really it came from my need to want to know and want to learn, and then want to sort of share that with people so that people can make their own choices based on what the science and the research tells us. So I think it came from there. And it also came from the fact that I'd been doing this work around the science of emotions, around positive psychology for a while. And I wanted, to your point, I wanted to go to Penn. But I was living in Sydney at the time. And yes, they said you could do it by distance, but really that meant traveling to Penn 10 times in 6 months. I'd just started my own business and it would have cost me $100,000. So it was so inaccessible to people. Whereas initially our diploma was face-to-face and now it's virtual. So we have people all over the world who do this. And because it's still live, it's still engaging, it's still got all of that depth of learning, you still get those little life-changing moments around it. So I think it was a drive to really make it more accessible to people, but to share the science so that people know why they're doing this stuff. And, you know, they try mindfulness and it doesn't work. Awesome. Well, let's look at why it might not work for you, or it does work. Well, let's look at why it might work for you. What are you doing, etc. So I think for me, it was about bringing the science to life and making it practical for normal people in normal jobs that don't necessarily need or want to do a master's, or they've already got a master's. They don't need another one. So that was the sort of point for me. And yes, it was a lot of hard work, because when you do a government accredited qualification, it's not just the same as putting a nice 8-week one online and calling it a certificate. There's a lot of rigor involved, and it took us 18 months to do it. So I'm proud of what we created.
Well, and I just think the world is a better place because of what you've created. Like, it's, I don't know, like when I look back, I think it was 2015 that I finished. And I was the first person in Canada, I think,
You were.
to get that qualification. So I was proud too. But it really did. When I look back at just simple ways, it made me especially a better parent. Because if I look back to me pre-diploma, there's like a shift in my life. I'm pre-diploma, post-diploma. That's how I kind of operate. And when I look back, you know, I used to get panic attacks because my kids would fight. And I started to recognize like how I was, you know, how my heart would race, or how I would get sweaty, or how I just go from irritated, because I used to go to just bang frustrated. But then of course, as I learned a little bit more about emotions and, you know, the rules that they followed, I'm like, oh, it starts with irritation. Okay, maybe I can catch it there. And so, yeah, it really did impact me. And I was able to work through that and notice it and apply mindfulness in a really healthy way. Because I really like how you're saying, like, you know, why is it working? Why is it not? What's working? What's not? So I had to try a lot of different things. And I think that's what you had to do too, right? So maybe you can, I'm really curious to get into that sort of space with you, what you've tried that's worked and what you've tried that hasn't worked.
Yeah,
you pick, where do you want to start, with what's worked or with what hasn't worked for you?
So I think what's really interesting, and you would know this, I have a saying, treat yourself as a scientific experiment. And I'm a firm believer in that. So I do that too. So I look at the science, look at what it says, and then I'll go do something. So even the last week on Friday, we had one of our Learn with Sue member sessions. And we were talking about the difference between hedonic, the pleasurable life, eudaimonic, the meaningful life, and the new research around psychological richness and which would you rather have, etc. And we had a really great conversation. So immediately my challenge to everybody is, okay, what are you going to do to increase your psychological richness this weekend? And it was fun. My first one was a silly little thing. My husband and I usually cycle to a place called Get Trucked, which is a campsite truck stop that does really good pizzas on a proper outdoor oven on a Friday. So we finish work, we cycle, we usually skip lunch, so we go at 5 o'clock and we have our pizza and we sit outside, and it's lovely. But it was pouring with rain. It's been pouring with rain here for weeks. And David said, there's no way I'm cycling. And I went, ooh, psychological richness, variety, curiosity, spontaneity. So I went, we're cycling. And it was a silly little thing, but oh my goodness, it was so much fun. It was like being a 6-year-old again. I'm riding along, I've got no mud guards on my bike, so literally there is water and mud splashing up all over me, etc. But I was going along going, whee, having so much fun. So I think for me it is about playing with this sort of stuff. And again, I like to read the science and do something. So if I think about, for me, what hasn't worked and what has worked, if I think about mindfulness doesn't do it for me in the traditional sense of a meditative practice. So my usual rule is treat yourself as a scientific experiment, go for 8 weeks, because the science roughly often does 8 weeks experiments. So I deliberately practiced a chunk in the morning of about 20 minutes and a chunk in the evening of about 20 minutes for an 8-week period. And at the end of it, I felt no different to what I did before. So I'm like, hasn't really done it for me. Now, what does work for me that links to mindfulness is the noticing and the curiosity. So being mindful and noticing things. So I go for a walk on the beach every morning. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, how can you go for it's the same beach?" It's like, no, it's never the same beach, because there's always something new that I notice. So for me, that's more me. And if I do practice mindfulness, it's probably a quick 30-second micro mindfulness to reset, check my breathing, take a moment, settle myself, rather than the 20-30 minutes sort of meditative practice. So that what didn't really do much for me. And especially I like moving. So walking mindfulness is better for me than breathing mindfulness or sitting, etc. The things that really work for me, and you just mentioned, is physiology, changing my physiology. I've read, there's 70 plus years of research into physiology, and I use that all the time. I check on how I'm sitting. If I feel flattened down, I look at my body posture and, okay, well, what am I going to do to shift that? I have a little baby trampoline beside my desk so that if I need to move, then I move. I try and exercise every day, and it's not perhaps your, traditional in the gym pumping iron or going to a class type exercise. I will get down my beach wherever I can, and I will, even if it's just 10 minutes with my feet in the sand and quick walk up and down. I'll do 25 star jumps in the corner of my room. So physiology stuff really works for me. Gratitude and writing my journal. I've written a journal for years, and getting my emotions out on paper really works for me. So there's quite a few things that I do as habits every day that help me reinforce the gratitude, reinforce the savoring, all of those sorts of things. The other one, if I may, that really works for me, and I'd really encourage people, and we sort of talk about emotions as data, they're just information, and sometimes we need to sit with it. And again, one of my little sayings is get comfortable with the uncomfortable emotions. That works for me too. And I'd really encourage people to try that, because sometimes it's really important, to your point, of noticing the frustration, of noticing the anxiety and going, oh, how interesting. I'm feeling anxious. Not, oh my God, I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I should be getting over this. What's happening to me? So I sometimes, in fact, only last week on my keynote, I said, show of hands if you've experienced grief in the last 2 months. And probably 10% of the room put their hand up. And I said, I hope you enjoyed sitting with the grief, because that's the way I think of it. I mean, I've had losses during COVID, same as other people. And sometimes it's really important to, maybe enjoy is the wrong word, I'm not quite sure what the right word is, but enjoy sitting with, noticing that you are grieving because you've lost somebody you love. And it's really important to sit with that and acknowledge that. And as I say, enjoy it, wallow in it for a while. And then what are you going to do with that? What did you learn from that person? Thinking about how amazing they were in your life, which then flips you around to gratitude. And then you can take those learnings with you. So I think that's a really important one as well.
You bring up something really valuable, because what I've been finding just in amongst mostly my LinkedIn profile and the feedback that comes from different people is there is a lot of talk about positivity becoming so toxic, right? And then there's a lot of talk about there is human suffering. You are going to experience messy emotions, and you do need to notice them. You do need to sit in them. How do you balance that? Because how long do you sit in a messy emotion without it taking you into, possibly what I would call a dark, tunnel, right? Where you just can't experience the gratitude or the peace or the hope or the calm or, yeah.
So for me, and again, this is one of the ways I think about what well-being is. Well-being is, do I have tools in my toolkit to increase the duration and intensity of my ups and decrease the duration and intensity of my downs? And apologies for the noise in the background. We're fostering 3 kittens at the moment.
I'm like, that's a kitten, right? Yeah. Okay.
They increase my well-being too.
There you go. They bring your highs even higher.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So if you think about that, it's not that you never experience the challenging emotions, the traditionally negative emotions, the difficult emotions, but it is, to your point, how long do you want to sit there? So for me personally, grief would be a classic example. You lose somebody you love. you don't want to go, well, I'm over it now, because that person meant something to you. So I lost somebody that I've very much cared about, a couple of people during COVID. And one situation, it hit me much harder than I thought. And I could barely stop crying for about 36 hours. I kept bursting into tears. But I immediately was doing things. So I grabbed my journal and I started writing about that person, about what I felt about the loss. And that led me to how amazing they were in my life and what I'd learned from them. So I started to feel a bit better. I collated some images, some photos of that person, because I thought, no, I'm going to put that together and have a little sort of book, for want of a better word, of putting those things together and saying, okay, well, this person was important to me. I would like to celebrate that. Whilst I couldn't go to the funeral, I made sure that at least there was a virtual connection and also a little celebration memorial here, even though it was only myself and my other half. And then the last thing I did was a mindfulness. And this is when I used mindfulness. I found an honoring grief mindfulness on Insight Timer. It was 15 minutes. By the time I'd finished all of those things over a period of a few days, I'm like, yeah, I'm done now. I'm good.
Yeah.
But the thing that sometimes people think is you can experience a negative emotion and then you just sit with it and you kind of wait for it to pass. No, it's an active thing. What are you doing to move yourself along? Equally, when you're having your ups, what are you doing to hang on to them, to make them last a little longer, to share them with people and those sorts of things? And this is the saying, positive psychology is not a spectator sport. You can't just go, oh, I've read all the books. You have to actually do it.
You got to live it. And in fact,
Absolutely.
that would be, I remember actually going for a walk and a break when we were in diploma program in Vancouver. And that is how I described you. I said, I'm like, Sue lives positive psychology. Like that was a really defining, yeah, it really truly is, because, and I think that's why I've always been curious to know, well, what does Sue do in her every day? Because it's just true when you see somebody who really true, it is how they identify, right? Like there's something about who you are that is so connected to well-being and the importance of it, that it's inputted into your daily living.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is it's inputted as far as habits. I have very specific habits I do every day to keep my well-being up. And I also recognize the moments where there's other things I need to do. And again, this was an example recently. So where I live, over the last sort of month or so, we've had significant amount of rains and we've had flash flooding. We've had whole towns underwater. Like literally hundreds and hundreds of people have lost their homes. Lost everything. We've been in our little pocket relatively unaffected. I mean, yes, it's been raining constantly, but because I'm close to the ocean, we haven't had any damage to our property, etc. But it's been quite devastating to see this. Our next door neighbour's been taking his team of guys to houses in the weekend to clear out. He runs a carpentry and building business, and they've just been ripping out people's houses to try and clear them out, and all sorts of things you sort of see. So there's that going on. Then you've got the war happening, with Russia and Ukraine. And when you think about that and you see the news, that's devastating what's going on there. And then there was one particular night where David had booked tickets to the movies and neither of us wanted to go. We were thinking, oh, this is just terrible. We don't want to go. There's so many terrible things happening in the world. Not really interested. The movie we were going to see was Belfast, and I don't know if people have seen it, but it's about the Northern Ireland conflict, sort of back in the sort of 60s, 70s. And there's a lot of literally hatred between people in the next street, same street, because of your religion. And basically, not great things happening. And it's a very powerful movie. But there's one scene in it where there's particular violence where they're raiding a shop. And I literally burst into tears because I am like, are we really still doing this? If I think about, Ukraine and the situation there, are we really still doing this? Have we learned nothing? And so I came home feeling so upset about all the things going on in the world. And then to your point, I was like, okay, You can sit here and feel miserable, but if you do, you are doing nothing to help anybody. You can't be the best version of you, so you can't then help people again because you're stuck. So to your point is, it was acknowledging that I feel frustrated because I can't do anything to stop people being bombed in their beds. I can't do anything to stop the rain and people losing their houses. So there is absolutely no point me getting caught up in that, round my head thinking. So it was, okay, well, how am I going to get myself out of this so that I can be the best I can be, so that when I have the opportunity to connect with somebody who has been impacted, like I know several people who've got family in the Ukraine and they're trying to get them out. Now, I can't do much to help, but I can be a better person to listen and to support and to be there. And you can't do that when you're not in a good space. Yeah. So again, that was a really lovely sort of flip for me of going, okay, well, while you're in this little hole, you cannot be helpful. Yeah. You cannot make the world a better place. So what are you going to do to get yourself out of it?
So you can be in the hole, but it's a temporary place to be. It's not a permanent place to be.
And it's important to acknowledge it. It's important to acknowledge the stuff that's going on in the world, but it's not important to sit there and just feel really overwhelmed by it, because then you can't do anything to help. Yeah. Whilst I can't necessarily change certain things, many of my clients are talking about how they can help people. Well, I can be there for those people. I can have conversations. I can support in different ways.
Yeah. And I think you just make me think about how, oh gosh, it's so easy to just not do it because you don't feel like it. And so when, like, you're basically speaking of a time where you didn't feel like it, and you decided that you still needed to do something to be your best version of yourself. What's that experience like, going from, I know I don't feel like it, to I'm going to do it?
For me, it's again a practice. So there's lots of different ways you can frame it, whether it's learned optimism or cognitive reappraisal, but it's basically that flipping of your thinking. And when I first learned the theory of learned optimism, or however many years ago, and you've probably heard this story, I literally stuck a piece of paper on the ceiling above my bed with a number 3 and a P on it to remind me of the 3 Ps. So when I'm going round in my head, or certainly when that was stuck there for that, it was about 3 months, when I would wake up in the night and I'm thinking about, oh my God, I can't do anything to help, this is never going to end, how terrible are we, why do we do this, etc. I can look and I can go, okay, how permanent is it? Well, it's not permanent. The rain will stop at some point. People will be able to get back into their homes. They will find somewhere else to live. People are losing their jobs. Okay, well, they will find something else. We will figure out a way. The war will end at some point, whether it's with all of us dead or whatever year, but there's still at the moment nothing I can do to change that. So things will change. So how permanent is it? How pervasive? Well, does my whole life have to be ruined because I'm sitting here wallowing in 2 things that I can't control, and one from the past? So it's about flipping those permanent, pervasive, and personalization piece. And the personalization is the bit that I really love, because I stopped and I thought, how much control do I have about the war? How much control do I have about the floods? How much control do I have about what happened in Belfast 40 years ago? Absolutely none. Yeah. What can I control right now? Well, I can control how I show up and how I get up in the morning, and how, and I think I was jumping on a call with one of our global clients who's been very impacted. They've actually shut down their whole Russia operation because of it. Well, if I'm the best version of me when I wake up, I can help support those people, not necessarily by anything tangible because I'm the other side of the world, but I can be there to have better conversations.
Yeah, that's the social support network, which is huge. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I really wanted to touch on, and you brought it up as you were talking about sort of the thinking, is how well-being fits into this concept of positive thinking. And I ask you to share because you said something pretty profound that I've had confirmed and reconfirmed as I listen to other, authors, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, or whatever you want to call them. But, it can be something that I hear often when I have well-being conversations with people. They say, well, I just, try to think positive. Or people will say that to me too, because the company name is Positivity Center. And they're like, oh, positive thinking is so important. So how does that fit into well-being? Maybe you can share.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because sometimes I do roll my eyes at the whole positive thinking, because for me, that's making it flippant. That's, it's like you've just lost somebody you care about, or you're having a really dark day, and me go, oh, well, be positive and it will be fine. That's just really annoying and rude and invalidates how you feel. So for me, positive thinking is not necessarily something I practice. What it is challenging my thinking around things. And it's not about necessarily seeing the good side in everything, but it is saying, well, is it as bad as I think, or what could be? Same as during COVID, a classic example when I jump on a podcast or something as a guest, the first thing so many people have asked me is, everyone's suffering right now, what do we do? And my first response is everyone suffering right now? Yeah. Because for me, what I want to know is the people who are flourishing through COVID, for instance, what are they doing? Because if I can figure out what they're doing and do some of that myself, maybe then I can still flourish. So I suppose what it is for me is it's not about positive thinking, it's more about positive doing. What are you actually doing? And again, I always joke about this, that positive thinking is, I don't know, you bought a new house, the garden is completely messy, there's rubble everywhere, there's weeds everywhere. You look out the window and go, I have a beautiful new garden, I have a beautiful new garden, I have a beautiful new garden. That's positive thinking, that's affirmations. But it's not going to change the garden. You've got to get out of the house and actually start pulling up weeds and moving those rocks and boulders, etc. And if you can afford it, you hire a landscape gardener. If not, you get out there and you get your hands dirty. Yeah. It's a bit like that with well-being. Is sometimes we think, oh, if I won the lottery, I'd be happy. Well, guess what? You probably wouldn't. If you're not happy now, you probably won't be happy if you win the lottery. But what you will do, what will make you happy is those little things that you do every day. The tiny things, the things that you sometimes think, oh, I don't really need to do this. I do so many things every day that I know keep my well-being high. And if I stop doing them, my well-being will drop. So I don't. I keep them up. I keep shaking them up. I keep challenging myself around each of those little things that keep me on track, I suppose.
Do you feel like there are times where your well-being needs more positive doing to stay intact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to travel all the time. Like literally, I was away every week. I'd be in Canada one week, I'd be in London the next, I'd be in Perth the next, etc. And there was barely a week that went by where I wasn't traveling. And my well-being was still pretty good. I would always say I love what I do, and I did. Now, because of COVID, I sleep in my own bed every night. I haven't been on planes all the time, and I love it. And it's like, oh, this is quite nice. I get to exercise on the beach. I get to have more regular healthy meals because I'm not, rushing and missing things. But as I say, just recently I flew down to Sydney and I was there for 4 days, and my routine completely went out of the window. I didn't exercise a couple of days. I didn't have my green drink a couple of days, the little things that I do. I even skipped my journal one night, which is almost unheard of, because I found myself feeling a little flatter. It wasn't playing to my strengths. One bit played to my strengths, the rest bit was all playing to my learned behaviors, and I started to feel drained. So it's like, okay, what are you going to do about this? You can either keep on that downward spiral, or you can give yourself a kick. And of course, you don't want to. You want to keep going on the downward spiral. Sometimes it's easier to eat more, drink more alcohol, stay in bed, those sorts of things. And it's at those moments where you feel yourself slipping. It's like, okay, I don't feel like going out and leaving this hotel room and doing something. And that's exactly why I will. So for me, it's almost, I have in my head, if it's the last thing I feel like doing as far as exercising or getting out there or whatever, it's like, okay, well, that's what you need to do right now. And you do need to be able to catch yourself, because it is too easy to fall into those little downward spiral loops.
Yeah, so true. Catching yourself, so key. Well, I just would love for you to, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Of course, it could go on and on. We might have to have a part 2. I'm finding that with almost every single person I talk to.
Of course.
Part 2. But maybe for all of our listeners out there, how might they find you or get in connection with you?
Well, there's numerous websites. So you can go to the langley.com.au, which is more of our sort of corporate side. We've got the Langley Group Institute.com, which is our diploma. You can find me at SueLangley.com. You can find me at learnwithsue.com, or just grab me on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email, sue@langley.com.au. I love to connect with people. And I love sharing the learning. For me, the whole point of what I do is to inspire people to be the best they can be, to share the knowledge and facilitate learning so that people can find their way to lift themselves up when they're having those challenging moments, to learn what makes us flourish. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, I will absolutely be there.
So good. And so until you reach out to Sue, I would just encourage you to get curious with yourself, keep playing, and keep putting tools into your toolbox. So thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
It is. You bet. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Wellbeing That Works. Before you go, take 1 minute to write down your takeaway from today's guest. And be sure to download our Wellbeing Evaluation Sheet to help you along your wellbeing journey. And if you've got something to share to inspire others, be sure to be a guest on our show. Until next time, with love and kindness. I did something I never thought I would do. I took a Tony Robbins Breakthrough Challenge. So it was like 5 days of Tony Robbins online. But it was so incredible. You know why it was incredible? It actually brought me back to being in the classroom with you. And I was just like, I know all of this. And I'm not doing hardly any of it. I won't say none of it, but I'm not doing hardly any of it. So no wonder why I'm feeling quite depressed. I mean, you know, and I was pretty honest with you. It was just challenging for me. I didn't rise up to the challenge of COVID. I just let it. I was just trying to tread water through it all. Yeah. And okay, whatever, it's the past and you got to move forward. And so one of the things I kept asking myself as part of that breakthrough challenge was, okay, well, here I am. This is where I want to go. What's going to help me close the gap? And of course, you know, connection. It's connection, and creating a community where I can talk this stuff, do this stuff, work out this, all the well-being language and living, like immerse myself in the living. And I was like, I got to have a community of people in which I do that with. So from a selfish reason, it was, I need to do this for me because I need to create a community for myself. And for the, right. Yeah. And then for the other people involved, it's, hey, it's an opportunity. What I really wanted this show to be about was showing people, and I think you're really going to resonate with this, is I don't want it to be about do these 3 things. Follow this 7-step system. Yeah. Right. And I know that's been something you've always been about. So I really wanted to just have conversations with real people about what they're really doing in their real lives to put in well-being in place, right? In practice.